it's the framework that needs to be there. And one of the key element in the framework is to have a sustainable business model. High feed-in tariffs or high incentives such as ROC SSR are by definition not sustainable. And what is just happening in Spain or in some other parts of the world, that includes the state of Gujarat in India today, shows that if you have high incentives, you're in a very shaky ground, and hence your ability to attract these big money seeking lower risk assets is jeopardized. And what needs to be in place first is the framework where solar is basically competitive. There's no room for big money for projects that are not based on competitive solar. We think that the UK market will only be sustainable with zero ROCs. It has to work on the basis of, if I use another British word, the contract for difference. If there is a contract for difference for solar, which mirrors that which is being contemplated for nuclear, for instance, and I'm talking about things that are below, significantly below 10 pence per kilowatt hour, probably 8 or 9. Unless there is a framework like that, I doubt what we call big money will be attracted to British projects.
I think one of the big advantages is that because we're using ROCs rather than FIT, we no longer have that 5 megawatt cap. And therefore, clearly you sweat the fixed cost much more efficiently with a 10 megawatt or beyond plant than you would at 5. And I think that goes a long way to actually offsetting that reduction. Clearly, the reduction from 2 ROCs to 1.6 ROCs was harder to swallow than a drop from 1.6 to 1.4, albeit like all these things, it comes to the point where you have to change something, you have to become more efficient in order as they continue to bite, that you can find ways of making them to continue to be viable. We've built over £550 million or deployed over £550 million of in-house equity, and we're now removing the, if you like, the debt element of that by putting project finance in. That reignites or allows us to use that in-house debt once again and develop more sites over the next number of years. We're looking, because there's pressure, and potentially the EIS market won't last forever, we're looking to have alternative equity sources, and we're currently doing some work with some other funding institutions alongside Octopus Investments to look for other means of not only doing what we're doing today, but expanding that beyond the current run rate.
Traditionally, the Europeans have got off fairly easily because the feed-in tariffs are backed by the government or by utilities, so it's very easy to get a local bank or a grandmother to invest in those projects. So now that those incentive programs either gone away or they've gone down to the point where they're too low and you have to actually sell consumers power direct, it's an entirely new mind frame, an entirely new business model. And so the existing firms are having a hard time making that switch. I think in general, most of the firms who are not comfortable with the move over will go out of business. And you see that with Gerlicher and others who are having problems. These are world-class EPC firms, world-class sales firms who never built expertise in-house on financing because they always outsourced it to a local bank or a local financial intermediary. Those financial intermediaries are not sophisticated enough to bring the US financial sophistication to Europe. And so those companies are losing market share because they haven't been able to keep up with that financial sophistication. And the entrepreneurs with the financial sophistication are choosing to create their own companies, not help out the existing companies.
Low-cost finance is an absolute necessity for solar power. What lots of people overlook is that PV is the most capital-intensive industry there exists. You need 10 euros of capital expenditure to generate €1 of revenues, of power revenues. That's versus 6 for nuclear, 3 for wind, 2 for gas, and 1 for a heavy industry. We're 10 times heavier than a heavy industry, which means that if you have high cost of capital, then there's no way solar can be competitive. So, and otherwise, the road to competitiveness for solar is to attract those very deep pockets of, for instance, pension fund money, which are risk adverse yet are happy with 5 to 6% returns. And that's where the holy grail of solar is. And the history of solar has been to attract hot money. high yield, high risk seeking investors, and this is, to be honest, what is currently being the case in the UK, has been the case in many European markets.
We're very conservative about our predictions. It's just the nature of the British, and at the moment, people are over the moon with the returns they're getting. It all started as about an investment, and this is a way of making money. And I think it has to change to say this is a sensible thing to do for your business. In the past, it was very much all investment led, and I think to a business that's concentrating on running its own business, it needs to concentrate on what it's doing and not necessarily some other scheme to make money. People are now looking at energy and having to control it, and they haven't in the past. So I think selling it to a client is not all about financial returns and is it right, is it wrong. It's very much more now about this is a sensible thing to do for the sake of our business.